Could Alphonso Davies, one of the best left backs in the world, leave Bayern Munich for Real Madrid? Well, his agent definitely thinks there's a chance. We are kicking off this week's episode of Canadians Abroad with a little transfer rumor surrounding Alphonso Davies, as his agent came out and told 365 Scores that Davies could look elsewhere next summer with his contract expiring in 2025. This was the quote: "There's interest from many teams. I'm sure that Real Madrid could be one of the clubs that would like to sign Davies. There are several Premier League clubs too. They all want one of the best left backs in the world. We'll see what happens." Alex, what did you make of that comment?
Yeah, it was an interesting comment from his agent, Nick Kwose. And I just find the timing of it all very fascinating, because this summer there were some rumors that Alphonso Davies could leave. Remember the faraway rumors of Real Madrid, Manchester City. We had a chat about that way back when. But, ultimately he decided to stay at Bayern, and it's a good situation. He's a locked-in starter now under Thomas Tuchel. He's been having a good run of form to start the year, good performances. But his contract does expire in 2025. And as we mentioned, next summer is really the critical mass, because that's pretty much the last time you can sell him for a fee. Because you're unlikely to sell him. Well, of course, you'll sell him for a fee in the winter transfer window, but next summer is the last chance to sell him for a big fee, because once his contract's 6 months, he can start negotiating with other teams. He could leave as a free in 2025. So it feels like if he's either going to re-sign with Bayern in the next year or he's going to leave. So the fact that Kwose has come out right away and said, well, look, teams are looking at Davies. If he were to leave Bayern, he'd be in a good position. Teams would be willing to buy him. I think it kind of sends a message to Bayern to be like, look, for these contract negotiations, if they're to keep Davies, they're going to have to come in hot as well on their side.
I like it. A little fuel to the fire, nothing wrong there. My honest opinion is I have no problem with Davies staying at Bayern. He's at one of the best clubs in the world. He plays almost every single minute. And even with Guerrero coming in this year, who's got Bundesliga experience, very different profile, it still doesn't really matter. It seems like when Davies available, basically he's going to play every single little bit. But it does intrigue me, the opportunity of maybe joining a Real Madrid. I think of every club in the world, the one that kind of stands out to me as probably the biggest club in the world is Real Madrid. And if you look at their squad, they desperately need a left back like him, because, right now they're playing even CanMNT there, who's not a left back. Nacho Fernandez has played there. Mendy's not really up for it right now. They don't really have that player that they want, which is obviously why these links are out there. Now, is there another club? Would you like to maybe see him go to the Prem if indeed he moved on, Alex? Or would it be Bayern or Madrid or bust?
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that sentiment, just because when you're leaving Bayern, it's never easy to leave Bayern. That's a super club. That's a huge club that wants to win Champions League. They win trophies. If you don't win 2 to 3 trophies a year, it's a failure. There aren't many clubs like that around the world, and really the only other ones like that are the likes of a Barcelona, a Real Madrid, certainly some like a Manchester City. So yeah, if he's going to leave a situation like Bayern, it has to be to the right fit. And I think if we've looked at the clubs, Madrid's just been one that stood out because that's a club that wants to win the Champions League. There's an enormous pressure, so it would be a step up almost in that regard, especially because almost with Bayern, as we've seen, sometimes the league, that pressure removes itself, just because Bayern can go through slumps and then they can still win the league. And with Real Madrid, if you're losing we saw it recently with their derby loss to Atletico Madrid. They've been in great form, yet you lose one game like that, it's just all the pitchforks are out. It's a different level of expectation. Plus, they could use a left back, so there's that fit that's there, versus if you look at options like a Man City or a Barcelona, for example, where those clubs are stocked at that position. So I think if Davies is going to look to leave a Bayern, it has to be a fit like that, and Real Madrid does tick all the boxes, and it makes sense to use that as leverage, versus if he's going to a club like in England, teams that could afford him, like a Chelsea. Would that make sense for him? We've seen the disarray at Chelsea has been in. Manchester United, same. Okay, Arsenal's been in a good reign of form, but still, you compare it to Bayern, it just makes so much more sense to stay at Bayern and continue to carve out his legacy there, which we have to remember is growing quickly, and as he's becoming one of the longest tenured players in the squad quietly now.
Absolutely, Davies is definitely loved in Bayern, but if I'm being honest, the opportunity to see Davies play on the left-hand side with Vinny Jr. really intrigues me. But at the end of the day, if you are going to ask me, I'm assuming he's going to re-sign and stay, hopefully long-term at Bayern. I think that's where he needs to be, and it's where he should be. But I do want to circle back quickly, Alex, to one of the best left backs in the world. Now, Davies has come up before and said he likes to play up front. He thought he was signed to be Robben's replacement, right winger. But whether he likes it or not, he is one of, if not the best left backs in the world. That's where Bayern sees him. That's where Real Madrid would see him if they brought him over there. That's where Biello sees him, because the Twitter or X erupted this morning when he was released under the defenders, and then Biello doubled down and said that they want to play him where he plays consistently. So what did you make of that and the opportunity that we may actually see Alphonso Davies play as a left back for Canada against Japan?
Yeah, I think it was an interesting comments, just because sometimes we've seen under John Herdman, there's been a lack of clarity in the sense that, we see Davies as kind of all over the field based on the need. And I think this year, to be fair, it's changed. I also think that's Herdman's kind of, realized that in his last year with Davies. And that's why we also can't forget that Davies has probably been the most consistent in terms of his position this year, and that's been left wing back for Canada. So the way I read it is, okay, either Biello sees that continuity, because Biello did mention later in his quote that he just wants to also continue what works for Davies, and that left wing back role works very well just because it's probably the best hybrid option in terms of what he brings going forward and what he brings defensively. At the same time, the idea of flirting with the left back position makes a lot of sense, because I think for Canada, playing with the 4-3-3, for example, it could be allowed them to fix some of the tactical issues that they may have had against top teams, where they still get three in the midfield, but maybe they have a bit more width, and Davies is able to provide that from deep. Either way, I think his best position remains as a wing back, but as we see for Bayern playing in that left back role, he just has so much value, and I think he's going to be in this position for probably at least a half decade just because of his speed. I think the speed is the big reason, because there's just so much ground to cover. And the fact that he's able to consistently be an overlap threat and still track back and often is the last man on defense for Bayern, that's a special skill. So maybe one day he becomes a midfielder or a winger. Who knows? Maybe he becomes an outside center back like David Alaba has become. But I think that won't happen until he loses his speed. And as we've seen this year, he seems to be faster than ever. So I see left back, maybe wing back in his future for a while now.
That's where I was on the fence, because I personally think he's at the best in the left wing back role. I think that 3-5-2 suits the personnel that Canada have, but I'm just wondering what is in Davies' mind, because I don't personally think, from understanding how Davies is, that he wants to play as a left back for Canada. I think he wants the ball, and we've seen him do that time and time again, where he comes into the midfield and he tries to make things go through him, and I don't personally think that's where he's at his best. I think he's at his best when he's running down the flank, using his speed. We've seen it a couple of times this year when he's assisted Harry Kane. Little 1-2, use his speed, whipping the ball. That is where you're going to see him at his best. So I'm almost wondering if playing a little bit further back even more might just simplify his game a little bit for Canada, because I did feel in the past year or so sometimes he'd play, and maybe if he was getting frustrated, he wasn't getting the ball as much, you start seeing him drift in a little bit and kind of try to make things happen on his own, where I think maybe if he just sticks at the left back role, takes his opportunities, maybe Alistair Johnston shifts in to make a back three for coverage, maybe it can just simplify his game a little bit. Do you think that could potentially be an option or a thought as to why Biello would want to do that?
Yeah, of course, because I think Davies also, he's going to have to, one of his next steps in his evolution is also proving that he can play in those sorts of roles, because for Canada, we've seen it. Sometimes when he plays higher up the pitch, of course, he can be very dangerous. He has a lot of goals, a lot of assists for Canada. Let's not get it twisted. But also there's been games where sometimes the ball sticks to him a bit too much, and the opposing defenses hone in on that. They're like, screw it. For them, they see Davies. They know he's Canada's big threat. They're going to triple team him, double team him. And to be fair, that's okay if Davies is by and far away the biggest threat on Canada. But that's not the case. There are still guys like Jonathan David. There's still guys, heck, when he's in form, Kyle Larin, we've seen what he can do. Tejan Buchanan, Stefan Eustáquio, Ismail Kone now. Just having Davies in a position where he ends up holding onto the ball a bit too much sometimes takes away from those sorts of guys. So I think if Davies can fall back further on the pitch, because it also creates matchup problems, because you're never going to double or triple team a left back. So maybe they'll also free up Davies to get a bit more space on the field while also getting some of his teammates the ball and maybe give Canada some overall fluidity. So I think for Davies, that's going to be, maybe that's just what he needs to find that consistency with Canada. And then from there, as he continues to evolve, become a player where he can really become an outlet, a one-touch outlet where everything just goes through him like a hub, then we can maybe see him play a little more inverted. That's why I've said once he continues to grow that part of his game, I see a future where maybe after the 2026 World Cup, he's playing in the heart of a midfield for Canada. But if that's to happen, that's going to, come with improvements like that to his game.
All right, Alex, it's time for a little midweek Champions League chatter, and we are going to begin with Alphonso Davies and Bayern, who came from behind to defeat Copenhagen. It looked very nervy there for a while, but Bayern continue to be dominant in the group stage of the Champions League.
They don't really lose in the group stage, really. I mean, the record speaks for themselves. They've had countless sweeps of the group stage, and I mean, they just find a way. It hasn't been the prettiest. Their games against United and now Copenhagen, not the most convincing performances, but big teams find a way. So credit to them for fighting back, because for a minute it looked like Copenhagen had the upside on. The crowd was phenomenal. So credit to Bayern for sticking with it. And Davies, he was his usual self on the left side, just, patrolling there for Bayern.
Very active Davies was. It was all smiles for Bayern, but it was misery and heartbreak for Celtic and Alistair Johnston, as late heartbreak for them against Lazio. Johnston did have an assist on a potential winner, but it was wiped out. What is going on with Celtic?
Yeah, look, ultimately, it's come down to moments. That's really what's hurt Celtic. It's too bad. It was such a great game against Lazio. Phenomenal crowd, first of all, at Celtic Park. Always is for these special Champions League nights. And they really gave Lazio a good game. They came out. They looked like they grabbed that lead. A bit of CONCACAF to CONCACAF link-up as Johnston found the Honduran Luis Palma. But Palma, he got excited, took off his shirt. Turns out he's offside. Maybe that killed a bit of their momentum. Lazio grabs the late winner through Pedro. And ultimately, looking back at these two games, it comes down to details and moments. I mean, it's so cliche, but that's the difference when you go from playing in the Scottish League where you dominate, you're the big dog, to playing these sorts of big teams, Lazio, Feyenoord. These teams, they know how to manage the details. They're also champions of their league, or top teams in their league, like Lazio was in Serie A last year. And the details just hurt them because you can't switch off the way they did on that Pedro goal. The marking was off. And even against Feyenoord the week before, you get 2 red cards in a Champions League game. You're not winning many games when you get 2 red cards. And those sorts of little errors defensively are hurting them, as well as a lack of finish in those key moments.
It was a similar script for Stefan Eustáquio in Porto, as they did everything except for score against Barcelona. I thought Eustáquio was incredible throughout this match. He was a work machine. He actually created quite a few chances, had a couple shots as well, should have scored, and he also had a controversial handball that was wiped out. I thought it was ridiculous. I thought it was a beautiful take right there in the shoulder, not handball at all, and won a penalty. It ended up getting overturned, no penalty given, and somehow Barcelona walk out there with a 1-0 win. What did you make of that one?
Yeah, with shades of Porto versus Inter Milan last year in the Champions League, where they pretty much, that time they got goalied by Andre Onana across 2 legs, did everything but score. As in this game, yeah, they did everything but score. They were all over Barcelona in the first half. Just couldn't score. Ter Stegen made some big saves. Some big tackles were in there as well from Koundé, Araujo. That back four with Cancelo and Balde was excellent for Barcelona. And then it was just a cheap giveaway on the first Barcelona goal, and then just more pressure, more pressure, more pressure. But a credit to Porto, it was a great performance. And Eustáquio is one of the brightest lights on the day. He's just everywhere. He's playing in the 8, but you're seeing him making big tackles. He was making life very tough for Oriol Romeo to start the game, just with his counter pressure, the way he was stepping on him every time Romeo got the ball, but then getting involved offensively off the ball. He was just everywhere. And it would have been fitting that if he were to win the penalty, that could have rescued a point or even a win for Porto. But ultimately, it felt very harsh. Yes, it bounced off his shoulder, but I feel like, of course, the rules are different for attacker versus defender. So, I'm not going to dispute the call. It just feels extremely harsh if that's hitting a defender like that. It's never in 1,000 years a penalty. And it felt like it didn't really help Eustáquio control the ball. Like, his arm, yes, it was extended, but it didn't really change the trajectory. But ultimately, VAR made their decision, and Porto weren't able to score on the day, and ultimately they kind of did it to themselves in that regard. Although, hey, they put up a good account to themselves, good moral victory, as we like to say.
It's now time to move along to our Canadian quick hits section of the episode.
Derek Cornelius remains in great form on both sides of the ball, as this time he chipped in offensively for Malmö in a big 2-1 league win over Brahma Karna. With this win, Malmö have climbed to the top of the Allsvenskan again. Of course, they started the year on top. They wavered a bit in the middle, but now they've been in great form and now lead the league in a great position.
Tajon Buchanan is back in action as he returned from injury midweek in the UEFA Conference League match for Club Brugge. He missed out on the Canadian men's national team camp, but it's probably for the best because he's just returning from that injury. That is all the time we have for in the latest edition of Canadians Abroad. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you enjoyed it, be sure to tune in for next week's update.